I declare open this hearing of the Public Accounts and Estimates Committee. I ask that mobile telephones please be turned to silent. I begin by acknowledging the traditional Aboriginal owners of the land on which we are meeting, the lands of the Wurundjeri people. We pay our respects to them, their elders past, present and emerging, as well as elders from other communities who may be here with us today. On behalf of the Parliament, the committee is conducting this inquiry into the 2025-26 budget estimates. The committee's aim is to scrutinise public administration and finance to improve outcomes for the Victorian community.
Just looking at the Housing Support Program Priority Works funding from the federal government.
Yes.
$249 million in funding.
Yes.
Can you outline the specific projects this funding will be directed towards?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that question, Mr. Puglielli. I wish I'd worn a turtleneck today. It is a bit chilly outside. So the Commonwealth Government's Housing Support Program provides an opportunity for states to fund new projects that expedite housing development toward the achievement of the National Housing Accord, and that's that target of 1.2 million homes for the 5 years from 1 July last year. So Homes Victoria has been allocated $101.1 million of this total $248 million program under the Commonwealth investment. So the implementation plan outlining how this funding will support site enabling works and the direct delivery of social housing in Victoria is currently under development for submission to the Commonwealth Government and public release. All projects do need to be fully committed by the 30th of June 2026. We've got 60% delivered by 30th of June 2026 and the remainder by the 30th of June 2027. I can assure you that I will not be allowing any money to go back to the Commonwealth because of an underspend. It will all be fully allocated, and I'm looking forward to continuing that work in partnership with Minister Claire O'Neill. We've seen a dramatic change in the way in which the Commonwealth has invested in housing and enabling infrastructure, and that work goes on. It's been, again, a good opportunity for me to continue last week and just yesterday, in fact, conversations about delivering additional housing to meet that need.
Thank you. Can I ask, will any of that funding be used for the public housing towers high-rise redevelopment?
No, Mr. Puglielli, this is about new projects that expedite housing development. So, as you know, we've got a number of tranches of housing development across those towers. That includes, as part of the allocation of $497 million to deliver at least 769 new homes from the Commonwealth, the Elgin Towers, those red bricks being deconstructed, and that work is currently taking place now. So we will continue to work with the Commonwealth. I also want to make sure that we are combining partnerships on work that Victoria has already identified with additionality that we can bring into the system over and above the work that we're doing. So Victoria, when we announced the big housing build and we continued with that work in investment in social housing, had led the states in the development of projects. And when I met with Minister O'Neill, I was pretty emphatic about the desire to make sure that our work in doing that preparatory piece is then put to good use in partnership with the Commonwealth.
Is Homes Victoria purchasing or offering to purchase private homes to relocate public housing residents to?
Mr. Puglielli, we invest across a range of housing stock options, whether that's because people are relocating that they're allocated or that they're in the priority cohort in the social housing wait list. We are also making sure that when we provide assistance to people, we're doing it in a way that best meets their needs. So there are opportunities for people to seek assistance with the preferences on where they want to live and the neighbourhoods where they are, and this is where they may have exceptional circumstances around what that relocation looks like. The investment in the relocation program represents an investment in making sure we work closely with tenants across those sites, and we want to make sure that there's that dedicated relocations process.
For the tower site redevelopment, in relation to the private homes element for those sites, what will the ownership model look like?
Towers, at the moment, Mr. Puglielli, the announcements that we've made are actually about the ground lease model. So when we have the ground lease model, to be clear, that land remains in public hands And when we develop that land, it is in partnership with community housing providers. They have a lease of 40 years over that land. At the expiry of that lease, it reverts to government ownership alongside the homes that are there. And it's also about that, it's either long-term rentals or it's social housing. And this is where we have an uplift of about 110% in social housing at North Melbourne. But again, these are about rentals or long-term housing in social housing. So to be really, really clear, this is not selling the land. The land remains in government hands and it is about providing that need and that uplift. And again, we're determined to continue to do that work in a way that also takes pressure off the private rental market, as I've spoken to earlier.
Okay. So those long-term rentals, they're not built to rent?
No, they're long-term rentals in terms of the consortium model that operates. There are long-term arrangements for people, and that can be based on, it's a site-by-site proposition. Often there are consortia that will develop opportunities for a combination of rental arrangements, site management. The community housing provider derives an income through rental revenue, Commonwealth rent assistance, and it's capped at that income range of up to 30% of a household income.
Regarding the government's commitment on Fitzroy Gasworks site to providing 156 affordable homes at that site, can I get clarification? What number of years is that housing guaranteed as affordable housing?
This is about transforming the Fitzroy Gasworks into a new neighbourhood. So it'll have more than 1,200 homes, including 20% affordable housing. You know about the definitions for affordable housing regulated by the Planning and Environment Act for very low and moderate incomes. They are, as anybody who knows this part of the world can attest, really close to public transport. There's a senior high school, a new multi-use sports centre and dedicated open space. We provided $4.4 million for safety upgrades to support the development back in 2020 and 2021. And this will make sure that we can have that precinct that delivers homes over time. 20% affordable housing, 1,200 homes, and as we work through that process, we will be in a position to provide further certainty and detail around the sort of question that you've asked. I'm very happy to provide you, as I think I've indicated in the House on multiple occasions, with further information about the progress of that work. Again, we do want to make sure that as we deliver housing, we've got that model of support through the Inner North Collective joint venture as the successful delivery partner to deliver 820 homes on parcels B and C. And that JV is comprised of Assemble, who has, as you know, extensive experience and expertise, Milieu and Hickory with Capital Partners, Australian Super and Hester, again showing how those partnerships work. An EOI for development partners to deliver parcel A on the site was launched in March this year. And we've seen stage one of those public realm works completed, with construction to commence on a 79-space car park within the Alexandra Parade median strip. So that's a very detailed way of saying, Mr Puglielli, I'm very happy to provide you with additional information as the progress of that project evolves.
In relation to Arden Precinct, previously it was projected to be mostly essential workers to live in that precinct, hence the infrastructure planning to reflect that. Given there's no new hospital plan for the precinct, has that demographic projection changed?
I'd like to see a mix of housing across our precincts.
For the SRL East Station Precincts, budget paper 4, page 168, what are the active transport metrics and KPIs for those precincts?
Thanks, Mr Puglielli. One of the things that we are doing in that intermodal connectivity is increasing the services that already operate along the lines. So when we talk about people coming in through from Gippsland to Pakenham and then around to Box Hill, we want to make sure that we're also providing that good intermodal connectivity. And this is where it's not only about public transport but about active transport. The draft structure plans that have been released have identified that public and active transport is a key priority for communities, that people, going to the Box Hill example that I talked you through, when 32% of people are not living with a vehicle of their own, they're either using ride share or they're using public or active transport. and that might be in combination with travelling smaller distances. So the structure plans that have just been released and subject to comment that will then be considered by an advisory panel as part of the exhibition and consideration process by the Minister for Planning will enable us to define the preferred outcomes that are important to each area. And as I said earlier, that will vary really significantly. That might include future land use or the work that we're doing around built form, additional infrastructure, open spaces, car parking, and also the future street network, amongst other things. And this is where the local planning schemes will also have a role to play in public and active transport. The Minister for Transport Infrastructure is also doing a power of work on everything from bus services and the increase to services that have been delivered, tens of thousands of additional services, as well as making sure that we have that increased capacity along the rail lines that already exist to make sure we're having more frequent services as well. So it's a network-wide set of challenges and opportunities, but as we move to bring those structure plans into an advisory process for consideration and determination, public transport and frequency and reliability of services will be key, and that will be something that's determined through that conversation.
Okay, so around like bike paths, walking paths, KPIs around those.
Yeah, we heard really clearly from people across the consultation and discussion process in the panel discussions that I was part of hearing summaries of. That included panels from across the line from Cheltenham through to Box Hill and a youth panel. People identified public and active transport and wayfinding as being a really critical priority. Being able to, for example, have somewhere to park your bike at a station for a turn up and go service, and having somewhere where you can walk, which is accessible irrespective of whether you have a pram or a walker or you're on a bike, that's something which is user friendly. We also know that as we see changes in demographics, we're going to have to make sure that open space is designed by reference to people being able to participate in community activity, whether they want to move beyond the area that they live and beyond those precincts, that 1,600 metre space, or whether they want to stay in the areas that are servicing their needs because of that good planning and design.
Residents in my community have come to me saying that they're struggling to find who they should talk to about concerns that they have regarding the project. Yep. Can I ask, are different departments working together on consultation? Are they sharing results of consultation with each other to ensure that resident feedback is actually heard by the right people?
Yes, that's a really good point. And again, I think it's important to acknowledge that change is really hard for communities, and I don't underestimate the impact of change or the importance of good engagement. The Suburban Rail Loop Authority has been working with communities for years now and has developed a really significant set of insights into the sorts of things that people want to see for their own communities, but also what the areas around those precincts want to see, and contributions from people across the broader community. We have a range of processes that have also encouraged input from people, whether it's online or face-to-face or written correspondence. The Suburban Rail Loop Authority has been a constant presence at community events, has been a part of community support, business and trader support, and also opportunities to support existing events, celebrations, and really place-based identity and celebration there. So there have been so many examples of community engagement, but of course, I would encourage anybody who's got questions or suggestions or concerns about what is happening in the community, whether it's disruptions or opportunities for partnership with the Suburban Rail Loop Authority to get in touch. We do try to make those platforms as user-friendly as possible, and again, there will be community pop-ups, there will be street activations, there will be community workshops. We will have an ongoing conversation with community as that project continues, and precinct reference groups will be a big part of this. Again, I don't underestimate the impact or the challenge of change, but again, I don't underestimate the challenges and the problems associated with inaction. This is where, when we deliver the Suburban Rail Loop, as we deliver the Suburban Rail Loop, from site disruptions through to changes to areas in and around existing stations. We're working really carefully, respectfully and collaboratively with communities.
Do you have visibility to how many grants are given out annually to the Aboriginal Community Infrastructure Program?
It's not specifically. It's just that there is a grants program that is allocated.
A recent report by Infrastructure Victoria concluded that 42% of Victoria's Indigenous community health infrastructure is in critical condition, 52% is at the end of its useful life, and more than 80% will need partial or full replacement within 15 years. Can I ask, how is the government responding to the need for urgent repairs?
Well, I think you need to break out the infrastructure needs and also to the health services needs, and the health services needs are very much a matter for, excuse me, very much a matter for the Minister for Health. But when I spoke to Auntie Jill about what the priorities for VATCHO were in terms of health infrastructure, their number one priority, she was unequivocal. You know, it was Dandenong. And the entire VATCHO network had said that was their absolute top priority, to be able to provide that. But look, it doesn't mean that we don't accommodate and build into much of our health infrastructure program things that will support First Nations people. I know the work going down in, say, Barwon Women's and Health, the new build there, is really focused on being able to support that significant community up there. Similarly to when I was up in Swan Hill, there was a new building that, there was an old building, but it had been repurposed for First Nations people who were getting services out of Swan Hill, so that there were First Nations people who could go and support community who were getting the services that they need, who may not have felt comfortable in that particular setting. It was a really interesting way to see that service delivered.
Regarding the $5.89 million set aside in budget paper 4, page 154, new projects for channel and waterways, capital projects by Ports Victoria, can I ask, will any channel dredging take place in any of these ports as a result of these works?
Look, thank you. I was wondering where you were going to go with your questions, I've got to say.
Man of mystery.
Ports.
Look, what we do in the channel, and this is sort of through works that the Ports Victoria do, is not dredging per se, but it's making sure that the channel actually, often they'll have to come through and remove some of the sand that accumulates in it, but there is nothing slated for dredging per se.
Even over the estimates?
Not that I'm aware, no.
Okay, and if there is sand movement happening, to what quantity are we talking?
Look, it'll depend on the vagaries of the tides and, the way that it's moving around at the time.
Back in November 2023, in response to my colleague, Dr. Tim Reid, member for Brunswick, you said the department was considering including 30-kilometre speed limits in Victoria's standard speed zoning policy. Can I ask, since then, what advice have you received on this? For example, does this require legislation?
Look, it doesn't require... great question. It doesn't require legislation. What we've been able to do is we're in the process of removing some of the red tape around it. So previously it needed to go through a trial process, and that was both for a 30 kilometre per hour speed drop, but also to a 71. So Road Safety Victoria has worked very hard to be able to remove that that paperwork, and instead we can work directly with councils. I note that most recently the Lord Mayor of Melbourne wrote to me requesting a speed limit drop to 30 kilometres per hour in East Melbourne, and we'll certainly do the necessary work to be able to keep people safe.
Thank you. Can I ask, over this term of Parliament that's remaining, would you hope to see this progressed to have that standard speed zoning policy changed?
Look, I think that's what's happening. And look, just by way of example, the City of Yarra, just, as an interesting fact, that delivered a 50%, by dropping the speed to 30, that delivered a 50% reduction in the total number of crashes and a 70% reduction in serious injury from crashes in the 5 years prior to that. Like, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and so hoping to see that before this term of Parliament ends?
Oh, 100%.
Brilliant, brilliant. I'll go to another very specific issue. Out in Hurstbridge, it's been noted that on Haley's Gully Road and also Arthurs Creek Road, these locations have repeatedly seen drivers hit and kill wombats as they cross. There's been several of these road strikes recently. Can I ask, has this been raised with you? Is there state funding that could be directed to addressing the road conditions in these areas?
They haven't been raised with me. Not that I can recall that has been raised with me directly. I know that, Georgie Herzell is particularly active in this space to what we can do. And look, having lived in the country previously and once hitting a wombat, it's not something I'd ever want to do again. But I have no knowledge of these particular roads.
Okay, that's all right. Is there state funding, though, that could be directed to this sort of an incident?
Well, it's about what I'd need to take the advice from the department about what those sort of treatments that would help prevent that sort of activity from occurring.
Sure.
So happy to explore that further.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you. Just back onto seatbelts that we were talking about earlier, those significant rates of people not wearing them. Has the department given you advice as to why this is happening? And there are initiatives in this budget that are going to turn that around?
Oh, look, it is something that we're seeing worldwide. Like, it's post-pandemic, but drivers' behaviour has changed significantly. And it's really, really disturbing. It's why the TAC spends a lot of money on education campaigns.
Just looking at the annual report from the department, page 53, seeing those steadily increasing road fatalities over the per 100,000 population, how is the approach in Action Plan 2, the Road Safety Action Plan 2, how is that different from what we've been doing in past years?
So there's a number of things that we do, and I take the advice from the road safety experts as to what we need to do to address, whether it's changing, the campaigns that we run to address some of the behaviours that we're seeing, assessing where the hotspots are on the network as to actually delivering infrastructure upgrades or whatever.
I declare this hearing adjourned.